wanted to address a very important point when it comes to growth in general and how we approach growth and how we deal with growth. And that is, what is a strategy that is bulletproof? So much of what I do is with the people that I work with is to tailor things to where they are personally. And that's a very important thing to do because, I have one small, like the bookshelf that you see behind me is not my Jewish bookshelf. I have about 5 of those downstairs, nor is it my entirety of my business bookshelf. These are like the books that I'm working on that are kind of in the queue or that I kind of keep going on up here. I also have like a line of books in my bedroom, which is kind of the queue. So there's a lot. And I read a lot. I think that reading is very important. But the interesting thing is that we need things that work for us. We need a strategy that works for us. We need something that is fail-safe and personal. And so that's sort of what I was going to speak to you today is, maybe you say, I don't have a lot of time. I don't have lots of stuff, I just need something that's going to work. And, what do you recommend? And what's interesting is that as we embark on a journey of development, self-development, working on ourselves, and we know that, as soon as you just you can walk, you can get lost so quickly because there's so many different approaches. The interesting thing, first and foremost, that I'll suggest, I'll bring out this concept, is that it says in the introduction to a famous book called The Mesillas Yesharim, The Path to Just, which is a book that I am referencing quite often in this series. It says that I didn't write anything here to teach you anything that you didn't know. It's very interesting. What does that mean? And then he goes on and he writes this whole book. And the book itself is so fundamental that the great Vilna Gaon, which was a rabbi living in the 1700s who really built the Jewish education system as we know it. He created his student really started the first big yeshiva, but his methodology is absolutely built into the framework of how Jewish education works nowadays. The Vilna Gaon said about this first rabbi that I quote, the author, his name is Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, and this book, Mesillas Yesharim. Vilna Gaon said that if they were alive at the same time, the Vilna Gaon, living in Vilna, which is in the middle of Europe, would travel all the way to Italy, where Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto lived, just to sit and study at his feet. So if you have one of the biggest rabbis in the world saying something that about the author, let's just say they don't say that about you and me. So it's very interesting because Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto starts off his book by saying that in this book, The Path to Just, How to Live a Successful Life, he starts off by saying, I'm not going to tell you anything you didn't already know. And then you're like, okay, well, that's very honest. In a lot of ways, when most of us would think about writing a book, even if we're going to repeat and regurgitate everything that people have been saying all over the place, we're still going to say, cutting edge, or you never heard it before like this, or whatever it might be. He starts out as look, you should all know this stuff. Now, one thing that's interesting is that a lot of this stuff comes out as extremely novel. But on the flip side, something else that's absolutely fascinating is why write a book about stuff that we already know? So he develops that concept a little bit more. And he basically says that, look, there are certain kinds of people that need cutting edge stuff. And there are, other people who are a little bit slower and they do the basics. But he says what you really need is to have the cutting edge people working on the basics. Again, and you look, that's so fundamental in the world of sports, in the world of business, all of these kinds of things. It's you gotta have the basics down. As Bruce Lee famously said, I don't fear a man with 10,000 kicks. I fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. So the idea here is not that you need the abundance of information, because again, nowadays, today, it's super easy to get lost. There's so much information, but rather you have to find information that works for you and drill it over and over and over again so that it becomes a second nature to you, or that becomes part of you, right? That's the whole concept of what we're trying to build. So the first step is, when it comes to building a strategy that works for you, you have to be able to think, what are some things maybe you should start, areas that you've studied in your life before that resonated with you, things in your life. For me, it comes back to over and over and over again. It always comes back to self-acceptance. It comes back to self-reliance. Not in the sense that we don't need God, no, not at all, but much more that we need us too. That so often, I think, in this generation, and again, I'm saying across the board as a person that studies a lot of religious stuff, I study a lot of self-development stuff, psychological stuff, we're always busy looking out there. how is this one rabbi doing it? How are they doing it in this community? What's the best way? And again, I'm not suggesting that it's not absolutely crucial that a person has a mentor, a person has a rabbi, a person has those to whom they should look up to. But on the flip side, because we become so focused on that in a lot of ways, and again, this was a famous problem that not famous problem, a problem that I had. One time we went. There was a speaker that came to town, and a famous speaker, and we went to go see the speaker, and I was not so impressed. I told my wife, I'm like, he wasn't that good. And, my wife was like, well, it could be that because you're always watching people and you watch like the best, who you think the best, obviously, you have an infinite number of selections and you find like 3 people that you follow, that you love, that you think are world class. So it's like, the bar is pretty high. So because there's such an abundance, again, just look at the platform on which this lecture is being hosted. It's like there's tons and tons of super qualified people saying super important things, and you don't hopefully have the entire day to just sit and watch it, right? So the idea is like, well, what are you going to do? And so the first step is to appreciate that it's not about how much is out there, but rather it's what's going on inside of you. So for me, because there's such an abundance, because there's so much potential information to learn, the piece of information that I keep needing to bring back to myself is that I'm already good enough, that I already know enough, that I have to learn how to rely on myself, that I have to learn how to have my own strong sense of intuition, and that at the end of the day, the thing that's going to serve me the most is to be good with myself and to show up authentically, right? So that's a theme in my life that I try to then filter and look for evidence wherever I go. So there's a certain concept when it comes to development that a person has to, first and foremost, find something that resonates with them, and then learn more about the thing with which you're resonating. Now, it could be that in the course of what you're learning, you might broaden out the topics and think through and learn new kinds of things. But, you have to kind of come back and find something that there's going to be some continuity with what you're studying, what you're learning, the area in which you're growing. All of these things, as we said, go back to fundamentals, right? What do you know? And you keep drilling it. You keep getting better at it. It becomes more and more a way that you see it. Again, do you feel better? Do you see, if you look back over your life, right? Do you see that you're getting better? Do you see you're getting easier? It's like, is it working? And you only really see that if you have time to apply the strategy, to know the strategy well, and to keep on drilling it. So that's the first piece. The second piece is to appreciate that your life has one of 2 options. Either you're getting better or you're learning, right? There's no such thing as failure. And that's absolutely crucial, because in our day and age, what's so important when we look at, again, and this has only been made about 1 billion times worse through Instagram and Facebook and social media and the 24-hour news cycle, is that you're always surrounded by the subconscious programming that other people have achieved a lot. And it's an infinite number, an infinite funnel of people who are high achieving. And you have to realize again how unnatural this is for our minds, and how much stress and strain it creates upon us, because this was something that our ancestors never had to work on. So when you're reading things like, the ancient sages and the sages, and them sitting and speaking about, like studying Torah all the time and being able to have all these elevated ideas and all these elevated thoughts, you have to realize that part of the reason why they were able to get there is because they weren't consistently bombarded with all of this other stuff on the outside, where a person could have a perfectly good life, a life that's fulfilling, a life that's satisfying, and they spend 20 seconds on Instagram and all of a sudden they feel pretty pathetic, frankly. And that's the crazy thing, is that the whole system is built on to sell you stuff. The whole thing is built to sell you stuff. Every time you see the random post, I can just go on my phone right now and do it for you, where it says, sponsored, and it's all carefully tailored. The platforms are making money to keep your eyes, platforms need to keep your eyes on the feed so that they can keep getting money from the people that want to sell you stuff. And it's interesting because it's all kind of tailoring, and it's this whole thing where you need something from the outside to be good with yourself. And so we have to realize that's about 1,000,000 times more impactful on our life now than it used to be back in the day. So if you feel like I'm not good enough, most cases that's because your surrounding is telling you that you are not good enough. Again, you build a business, right? You go on Instagram, you see 300 people have businesses that are 1,000,000,000 times more successful than you. And it's not like, okay, well, they're working really hard. No, they're taking pictures on their boats. They're taking pictures on vacation. This whole idea of the, again, I don't know so many of these people or none of these people, but whatever, let's say they exist. It's like the laptop millionaire that's working in Bali 2 hours a week, and you're like slugging to trying to build your business at home. So it's like, the world infinitely expands out to show you all of the things that you're not. And that's very difficult because it gives us this sense that we're missing out, or that if we would do something different, we could kind of have that. And what we don't appreciate is that everything in our lives, as we spoke about a little bit in the last session, right, that everything in our lives is like kind of tailor-made for us. And so we bring our lives with us, and we bring ourselves with us wherever we go. So even if you see something that someone else is enjoying, it doesn't mean that you would necessarily be able to enjoy it, or it wouldn't look the same way for you, or whatever it might be. Again, in no way am I saying don't live the life of your dreams. Live the life of your dreams. Develop the idea of what do you want your life to look like. It's like, you have such an amazing opportunity. Like I had a conversation with my daughter, and it's just like, look, figure out what you like and get good at it. Again, call me unconventional, but I feel like that's, for me, I sat and I was thinking deeply about this. It's something that held me back in a lot of ways, because I'll say it very openly. Like I have a sense that there's like lack, and I'm aware of it in myself, where I'm nervous because it's like I have a really great life, but I'm scared I'm going to lose it. I'm really happy with how my business is going, but I'm afraid it's all going to go away. It's like, wow, where does that come from? Like, why is it so hard to just live in a place where you assume you have emunah, you have faith that things are going to get better? I thought to myself, it's like, well, interesting. It really. So again, I coach myself sometimes. I think it's a good thing, right? I also have a coach, but I try to coach myself sometimes too. I thought to myself, well, where does that all come from? I thought back to my education, and in my education, it was like, there were things I was naturally good at. There was things I loved to do, and there were other things where it was really, really difficult. And it wasn't like difficult because it was like challenging. It was like I just didn't like doing it, right? I'll put in that category like math. Right? I really didn't like math. I'm not a very detailed systems-oriented person, right? I'm not going to be a CPA. Don't have any desire to be a CPA. But like, in the education system that we have, at least here in America, in the West, right? You have to do all these kinds of things. And I don't think it's not like it's important. I think it's very important that you have kind of a broad component of knowledge, so you know different stuff and you kind of know what's out there and what has to be. I'm all about that. But I would always associate, a little bit because of how I was raised, my value with how well I did in all of these classes. And with certain classes, that was fine. Like I liked doing it. I worked really hard and I got good grades. On the other hand, it's like I worked crazy and I felt like it was just kind of like outside of my comfort zone. And my mom would get me like tutors, or she would work like really hard with me. But I still felt in a lot of ways like success was outside. Like I couldn't do it without the help. Right, and she pushed me really hard, right, to work hard, kind of like the Jewish tiger mom kind of an idea. So what's interesting was what I realized is that if I just tune out, again, she encouraged me a lot, yeah, and I attribute a lot of my success to that, and she was always like pumping me up, but also because of how I was raised in a lot of ways, I always feel like, there's like work has to be hard. Right? Or that abundance isn't so like doesn't just like come to you. And what I wish I would have figured out earlier was just go where you're passionate, do the best you can, get really good at it. And then your opportunities are going to surface on that end. And instead of worrying about what you're not, or what's hard for you, or what's difficult, right? Just dig more and more and more into what you're great at. And then try to find people that can help you round out your team. So there's a very famous example of what Henry Ford famously, there was a journalist that was very bitter because Henry Ford was not an educated man. Also a little bit anti-Semitic, or very anti-Semitic, but just, let's just talk about the part where he was the most successful businessman in the country at that point. But Henry Ford, there was a journalist that interviewed him, And the journalist was bitter because the journalist went to, whatever, a great school. And here he was a journalist and not making a lot of money. And there's Henry Ford. And the journalist went into Henry Ford's office with the intention of embarrassing him and showing him how much he didn't know. And the journalist started asking him these tough questions. And Henry Ford figured out what was going on. And he said, I see what's going on, right? He said, the difference between you and me, you, Mr. Well-educated man who doesn't have the kind of material abundance that I do, says you think you have to figure it out on your own. He says, but with me, I know that I don't know most things, but I do know. He pointed to the telephone. He said, when I get on that, I can figure out who I can ask, and then I have the information. So I think that concept is so unbelievably important. Where does that come from? I'm going to explain just how that dovetails into what we're talking about. So if the first thing we discussed was find something that works for you, the second thing we discussed is that there's an abundance of information out there, and everyone else has it's very hard to kind of just sit with a learner's mentality because so many people are quote unquote finished on the outside. And the reality is A, they're not finished, and B, it doesn't matter if they're finished because you're not, right? So you have to have the ability to really turn into and have faith and courage to continue to grow in your method. And that's why every day, like we said, every day you're either winning or you're learning. There's no backward step. And ultimately, again, if you think about that mentality, which Carol Dweck calls in the famous book Mindset Growth, she calls it the growth mindset, right? The idea that I'm just getting better. And again, I'm going to spend 2 seconds to discuss that a little bit, right? So there's two. There's something called a fixed mindset. There's something called a growth mindset. The fixed mindset is, as one of my clients said so nicely, he quoted Mark Twain, and he said, I think it was Huckleberry Finn. It says this, it says, tell me about yesterday and I can tell you about your tomorrow. And I was basically speaking to this man. He's an older man. And I was saying, you're not happy in these 3 areas. And what if we can change those things? And his response was, but I know how it is and it is what it is and everything like that. I said, great. So that's called the fixed mindset. Right? What happened yesterday is going to happen tomorrow. Now, what we know also, and in the book Mindset, she does all of the tests on this, is that if a person sees their abilities as on a trajectory and they're getting better, right, all the time, so they have that growth mindset and they naturally achieve so much more. Here's the really crazy kicker. They did this study with children. Children that were said you're good at math, right, or something like that, you're good at reading, you're good at whatever it might be, they're much less likely to push themselves out of their comfort zone because they don't want to lose that identity of what they have. But what do we know? If you never push yourself out of your comfort zone, you stagnate very, very quickly. So even if you have someone that has a natural skill in a certain area, right, with this, if they don't have that growth mindset, they're going to be left in the dust. So we want to adopt that growth mindset. That's ultimately why I named the topic of this class, having a bulletproof growth strategy, is because, again, there's an idea about, I forgot the investor, but Tony Robbins talks about him. Is it Ray Dalio? I think it's Ray Dalio. Tony Robbins speaks about it in the book Money Master the Game, which is on the shelf there somewhere. Okay, well, whatever. It's back there. I recommend it. Tony Robbins, Money Master the Game. He speaks about this all-weather portfolio, where basically Ray Dalio worked out how do you make money basically in every economy, and how do you set up your assets, and how does this whole thing kind of work? Great. So that works for the money world. But what about life? Right? What's an all-weather strategy for growth? What's a bulletproof strategy for growth where you're not going to screw up, you're not going to have to get started? It's the growth mindset. It's the ability to think that every single day I have an opportunity to learn or grow, and I'm not going to attach my ego. I have to work on that. I'm not going to attach my ego to my outcome. My ego is irrelevant, and the more that my ego pops up, the more it's holding me back. So if I look like an idiot, or if I make a big fail, that's called it's a learning day. Right? And I have a good day, that's also called, that's a winning day. Great. So I'm going to try to do that again. I'm trying to do a little bit more. I'm going to push myself. And so if you have that mentality that my goal in life is just to grow, my goal in life is just to get better, right? You will hit all of those things in your life, and it won't hold you back. You will not get thrown off of your game, because again, even if you flounder, right? That's the biggest thing. It's like in the diet culture, diet mentality, whatever it might be. You have an off day, you have an off week, right? Now, if your whole thing is I have to be perfect, so you're done. The diet's over, and you're going to go put all the weight back on. If I'm growing, so then you sit in, you notice your triggers. You say, okay, you don't feel so bad about it. And then what do you do? It's the next meal, you can eat a healthy meal. The next day you can eat healthy, right? Just get back on the horse. Just get back on the horse into everything. And that's the concept. So just to go back and to say the 3 points in order, step number 1 is, for this bulletproof strategy, find something that works. drill it. It's not about the infinite amount of information. It's the information that you have right now. And just get a little bit better every single day. And if you're doing that, you'll find yourself start to overflow with positive information. You're going to feel good about the process, and you're going to be really excited not only about the process that you're on, but the destination that you're going to. And the alternative is, not a great thing. It's very hard. You fall off very quickly, and you're really hard on yourself. So be compassionate, be growth mindset, have a growth mindset, and keep up the great work.